So my name is Monica Bartek and I'm from Law Faculty, Warsaw University, and it's really my great pleasure to, first of all, maybe introduce all the guests and speakers. We have today 5 great ombudsmen from different countries. And let me start from the lady, which is Dr. Ule Magise, ombudsman from Estonia. Dr. Kinga Kreuter, ombudsman from Austria. Dr. Rafael Ribor Masso, ombudsman from Catalan, Spain. Mr. Peter Tyndall, ombudsman from Ireland. And last but not least, Polish ombudsman, Dr. Adam Bodnar. And we agreed that we will proceed in giving Mr. Adam Bodnar, ambassador is the first, sorry. So, Ambassador of Austria will speak first, and then Adam Bodnar, and then we'll go to the discussion.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. I'm not going to speak. Yes, I'm going to speak, but you didn't come tonight to have anything from me. So I will mainly do the honors and thank our co-organizer very much for co-organizing such an eminent panel of 5 European ombudspersons. To mention our co-organizers, Institute for Public Affairs, the Office of the Polish Ombudsman, and the Dreamers and Craftsmen Social Innovation House. Ombudspersons do not constitute the common heritage of European constitutionalism, where Poland played such an important role with the Constitution of 3rd of May 1791, 225 years ago. The Ombudsman institution came to us from Scandinavia and has different roles and tasks in different countries. My country, Austria, adopted it in 1977. Today, the International Ombudsman Institute, headquartered in Vienna, counts 170 state and regional independent ombudsman institutions in more than 90 countries worldwide. Rarely in history, a concept of a legal institution has so quickly spread over the whole world. What most ombudspersons are sharing is a parliament-based, low threshold and additional complaints institution beyond the traditional court systems. In Austria, this concerns primarily administrative acts. But the Austrian ombudsperson institution, like many others, has also a remit in human rights issues. Human rights and ombudspersons are so intertwined that in some countries, the Human Rights Commissioner equals the ombudsperson. The Ombudsman institution, wherever it was established, quickly became a very important pillar of justice, firmly anchored in the country's constitution and very highly esteemed. In Austria, the Ombudsman institution is defined by the constitution as one of the supreme organs of the state. Ladies and gentlemen, political touching upon ombudspersons enshrined in the country's constitution, be it as to the institution or the personalities, be it by law or be it by facts, is regularly arousing suspicion domestically as well as drawing international attention. Concluding, I'm looking forward to a very fascinating debate, and I already thank you all for having come to Poland and to this public discussion which was organized rather late.
The floor is yours. Dr. Adam Bodnar, Polski Rzecznik Praw Obywatelskich, Polish Ombudsman.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude that you decided to come here in such a great number. I think we were not expecting that this conference or this seminar will bring so much attention of Polish audience. And this meeting today is connected with the visit of the International Ombudsman Institute. It is the organization that associates, I would say, a majority of ombudspersons and national human rights institutions from all over the world. Here in our panel we have representatives that are making more or less monitoring mission to Poland concerning the situation of the ombudsman in Poland. So basically they are trying to answer the question why Poland needs the Commissioner for Human Rights, why Poland needs the Ombudsman, what is the position of the Ombudsman in the constitutional legal structure, and whether the Ombudsman has any problems with performing its mission, its delegated task. And I would like to express my great thank you that you have decided to come with this mission, because I think it's really important in this particular moment of Polish history to be really interested on what is going on here on the ground. I would like to say, and basically I would not like to take my time, because I think most of the people here know that what is the reason of the existence of the Ombudsman and what is the constitutional regulation, what kind of powers the Ombudsman has. But I would like to add one thing, that in Poland, the Office of Ombudsman was established in 1987. The first ombudswoman was Professor Ewa Łętowska, and then we have a sequence of great ombudspersons, each of those persons contributing its own passion, energy, knowledge, competence into the office. And over the time, also the constitutional regulation and the legislative regulation of the Ombudsman office increased. Right now, I think it is one of the most competent institutions in Europe when it comes to, when you compare with other ombudspersons institutions. But I would like to point out two issues. First one is that the Office of Ombudsman in Poland proved to be important because before 1989, and even those 2 years before, we didn't have experience of the rule of law country. We didn't have experience of the country protecting human rights. And there was a need for the institution that would teach lawyers, judges, prosecutors, administration, what does it really mean to protect rights and freedoms. We didn't have hundreds, thousands of lawyers that would bring on a daily basis the importance of human rights in the court discourse, that would argue in front of the administration why rights are needed, why you have to take seriously rights that are expressed in the Constitution. And the Ombudsman was needed for this, and it seems it is still needed for this. Second point I would like to mention, which is a little bit specific to Central Europe. It is not the practice in all countries where the Office of the Ombudsman exists, is the power to bring cases to the Constitutional Court. Is the possibility for the ombudsperson to request the review of the constitutionality of laws that are adopted by the Parliament. So the interaction between the Ombudsman and the Constitutional Court proved to be one of the most important factors in the development of the Office of the Ombudsman in Poland. And Professor Łętowska she's always referring to the example that the role of the Ombudsman is to play so-called ping-pong, tennis table, with the Constitutional Court. That there must be somebody who is sending those balls to the court, and it is the role of the court to answer in this or the other way questions which are asked by the Ombudsman. And over years, usually there were 20, 25, 30 cases per year submitted to the Constitutional Court for review. So it is an important factor in this institutional game in protecting rights and freedoms, making this control of the constitutionality that is employed by the ombudsperson. And if we look to other ombudspersons from, let's say, Europe, not many institutions have that kind of power. And basically, in a number of Central European countries, the power and the relationship with the Constitutional Court was based on the Polish model. And we all know that we are facing constitutional crisis right now, and basically this crisis has impact in consequence on powers of the Ombudsman, but also brings a question why the Ombudsman is so much engaged into defending the independence of the constitutional court. So I would like to say that it is not just because it is just a conflict to solve, but it is a conflict which has dramatic consequences for the scope of rights and freedoms. So that's my very short introductory speech, and if you allow me, I will sit to observe you. Okay?
Thank you very much. And let's start. And in fact, if the question would be constructed in a way, do we need an ombudsman and why it is so, it would remind an assignment that children were getting in a previous time in school. Well, who is your hero and why it is Lenny? But the question is created differently. The question is actually saying, why do we need ombudsman? And that assume that we agree that yes, we need it. We just need additional data. And actually, thank you very much to the Austrian ambassador to remind the history of the Ombudsman Office, but this is not really so easy and so clear, because if we look into the history, we can see that this is 17th century, the beginning of the 17th century, while Charles XII, being 15 years old, becoming king of Sweden and going out of the country for many, many years, making wars. At that time, Sweden were fighting wars. And in 1713, again doing wars, he realized that in order to keep his power in the country, he has to have a representatives who will take care of his power to make sure that the law that he created will be running in a proper way. And in order to do that, he created an office of his representatives who is to work in such a way that people can come and claim that the law is broken. And in this way, by representing the king, he can make sure that the country will be run the way the king wants. King is coming back to the country and the office is closed, but remembered. And it is only 1809, when again, king is fighting. This is already another king, but he's captured by Turkish and Russian altogether, and they recreate the office, but this time, it is not the representatives of a king, it's representatives of the parliament, to make sure that the law that is created in the country will be really observed in, again, such a way that the people can come and complain. And the ombudsman is not getting the right to solve the problems. He's only she, well at that time it's he, and with this ending it is another problem, but at that time he can only suggest that the law of the parliament is not really followed. So from the very beginning, although we used to say that this is an ombudsman office, those offices have very different elements in their names and in their structures in different countries. Those 4 countries, which is Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, well actually we should add probably Iceland, are the first countries that have an office. And it's not the same office, even though, because if you take those words, ombudsman, or person, then you'll know that this is message and that there's a representative of a message, which is going, and again, to those who keep the power. So I think it's very important to see that this office is actually created to make the country being ruled by the law established by the king or by the parliament. It's just a technique which allows people to indicate where those laws are not run properly. So, and the truth is, it's so popular today. The 4th country was New Zealand, and it was like 1962, and then it went off, right? It's 150 countries, and believes me, even China is saying, no, we were the first. And it was 266 before the Christ, right? So this shows that the office have a great importance. But probably it might mean different things in different countries, and having 4 different ombudsperson here, thank you once more, and the floor will be yours right now. We only have to agree on one thing. I should speak less and promise to speak less after that. But then we will ask you 4 questions. You will give us answer, and then we invite public also to speak. And you can ask a question both in English and in Polish. Pytania mogą być zadawane po polsku, wypowiedzi mogą być również po polsku. Mamy tłumaczy, którym dziękujemy i będziemy się komunikować wówczas. So the first question is why today we really need ombudspersons. Go ahead.
Thank you. From the early days in Sweden, and then probably if you look at the Danish ombudsman in 1955 as the model that New Zealand adopted, and then much of the English-speaking world and otherwise, the issue is about the imbalance of power between the citizen and the public service user and the state. And the reality is that for most people, if they get a decision or receive a poor service or don't receive a service that they're entitled to, the difficulty for them in actually dealing with the state is the resources available to the state. So if they, for instance, only had the option of going to court, many people who are most dependent on public services couldn't afford to go to court in most countries. The cost of accessing the legal system is very high. So what the Ombudsman does is to provide not an advocacy service on behalf of people using public services, but rather to provide a neutral arbiter, so that the playing field, if you like, is a level one. And so that citizens can then, and other users of public service, I'm very conscious that in a country like Ireland, saying citizens when there are so many people from other countries, including Poland, living there and using public services, citizens probably the wrong word, but users of public services need to have some assurance that if they're not getting what they're entitled to, that there's somebody they can go to after they've failed to resolve the issue with the local service provider. That's at its simplest level. What makes an ombudsman different in many respects from the courts, in some ways, here in Poland, access to the courts is the fundamental role of the ombudsman, but for the rest of us, we're almost an alternative to the courts. We're somewhere you can go, and we have the power to resolve issues by whatever means necessary. So why do you need an ombudsman? Somebody needs a benefit, somebody needs access to public housing, somebody's received poor health care. There needs to be some institution that is able to hold public services to account when they get things wrong. But also where the ombudsman goes beyond that is quite often you will see that the injustice has been caused even though no one has done anything wrong. They've followed their own processes and procedures, they've behaved in accordance with the law, but what's happened is an injustice. And that's where an ombudsman is able to say, this is not just a legal matter, this is about the way this system is working is causing injustice to people. So you need someone who can do that. And then the final characteristic that's critical is that unlike tribunals or courts, ombudsmen see a range of complaints, and one of the first questions you ask is this caused by a one-off mistake, or is there a cause, a systemic cause, as we would say, to this? Is there something wrong with the way this body is behaving with its processes or its procedures, which means not just this person, but some other people, and sometimes many other people, may have been affected. Let me give an example from my own practice. We had a number of students come to us who had applied for grants. They had filled the format correctly, and they'd been given those grants, and after 3 years the government realised that quite a number of people shouldn't have had grants. We could see that this was likely to affect many more people than the people who had complained to us. So we went and looked at all of those people. And in the end, we discovered that more than 1,300 people had received demands to repay grants, and they had done nothing wrong. And the total cost of that was over 4 million euros. Now, without an ombudsman, each of those might have been able to pursue their complaints on their own. They might have succeeded. But most of them wouldn't have. Some of them would have repaid, some of them would have been taken to court. Nobody would have identified the systemic flaw that had led to the problem in the first place. So we didn't just get redress for them, we got the whole system changed so that nobody else could be affected. And then we thought, well, if government are insisting that these people repay grants, who else is being told to repay money that they had in error because of the government's mistakes? And we found that pensioners were being asked to repay money that they shouldn't have had, sometimes large sums of money. And we intervened there. So it is having a supervisory body gives you the opportunity to say, public service providers, if they don't get it right, there's someone who can hold them to account and not just get redress for the individual, but get changes to systems so that other people are protected in the future.
I agree with everything Peter Tyndall said. To put it in a little bit different way, what we actually need, in my opinion, is the independent and effective, efficient constitutional review, administrative courts and ombudspersons as part of that. I hope we will have a chance to describe our powers and institutions, which are a bit different, later. But from my own opinion, from my own experience, I can say that I see my role as someone who can really solve the problems of the people and solve them quickly. In some cases, it's absolutely possible. For example, one of the recent cases, one young man from Ukraine came to Tallinn, Estonia to study, had changed his driver license in Ukraine just before he came to Tallinn, and now wanted to receive Estonian driver license. Public officials refused to change the license. They said because he could change Ukrainian license, but not the international one. There was some confusion with the dates, and now the young man was absolutely unhappy. He turned to us. We explained to the officials the meaning of the law and the meaning of the European law in the same case. And this person could quickly, within a week, change the license. And I feel that's why we need the ombudsman.
Thank you very much for the invitation of this event. I am very proud to be here as Catalan Ombudsman, as a Europe President. And let me tell you that I come from a legal democratic frame that was born after a long, long dictatorship. We had for the first time the Ombudsman in the Spanish Constitution in 1978 and in the Catalan Statute of Autonomy in 1979. I think that ombudsmen are needed more than ever, either at our local place, either at European level. If we are talking about real ombudsmen, if we are not talking about fake ombudsmen, what do I mean? First, independence, absolutely independence. Independence in the election, independence with means, meaning budget, a very well protected budget, not a budget at government disposition, a budget that really it's the correspondence of what should be done. It means personnel, sufficient personnel, more than ever that we are getting new competence as OPCAT, as access to information, as equal gender, as LGBTI, etc. And means non-removal, except in very exceptional and very well-defined cases. If you don't fulfill those conditions, you are getting less and less the characteristic of an ombudsman. And be able to fight maladministration. Maladministration is not an insult, it's a technical qualification coming from all administrative laws. And it means fighting maladministration, as Ulle was saying, giving solutions, even beyond legality. If you want only a decision on legality, strict legality, legal claim, it's a court. But the ombudsman can go beyond legality, in a human way, with real solutions for each case. Could be a public policy, absolutely legal, but absolutely maladministration. Because failing in many matters, especially not solving the problem of this person. And we have now human rights guarantees on the hands of the Ombudsman too, meaning constitutional definition of human rights, but the international definition of human rights. We just work in my office, let me advertise for a while. We have it in our website, a book on international treaties and the definition of ombudsman. And let me give you examples of our last report, 2015, to say why we are needed more than ever. Normally, following the Swedish path of early 19th century, we used to say bureaucracy is the main thing for complaints. No longer, no more. Now, which is the winner? The winner is social rights, like problems on social transference, like problems on health. And the second one are a lot of rights that are pending of public administration, but also of private companies. Rights that are on the market, like finance, like housing, like communication, like consumers, no longer on hands of public companies, a lot of them on hands of very powerful private companies, and as was saying Peter Tindall, in a very unbalanced relation in between the big company or the big administration and the small person that should be protected. And the third thing is freedoms. Access to information, the electoral process, basic rights, OPCAT, gender equality, etc. Challenges are getting bigger and bigger. And I suppose we're going to be able to develop why they're getting bigger.
Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me start with a remark about the history of ombuds institutions. When I was in Ankara years ago, there is an ombuds institution in Turkey, hopefully longer. I learned from the Turkish colleagues that the very first ombuds institution was not in Sweden, it was in Turkey. Well, in reality, I think it was not a very good idea to make a complaint against the Sultan in Turkey there. And so we learn, sometimes we should not believe everything we learn from this country also nowadays. But it was a very interesting experience for me. We represent here the only global organization. Currently we have 175 members in more than 90 countries. The link is the Vice President Global, and the colleague from Estonia is board member, and Rafael is the European President, and I have the honor to be the General Secretary. And we have a lot of duties, but one of our responsibility is to support and protect ombuds institutions and ombudspersons under threat when they are under pressure. And there are a lot of reasons. I have a few examples worldwide. For example, the Ombudsman of Malawi, there was an attack at her home. Or in South Africa, the colleague, there were death threats against the public protector of South Africa. Or in the Bermudas, damaging remarks by the minister towards the ombudsman after she criticized the minister. Or in Europe, for example, the Slovak public defender of rights, the Slovak parliament refused to debate the ombudsman report in the parliament. Or in Croatia, the parliament rejected the annual report. A lot of examples, and sometimes there is a more distinguished and less obvious way to threat ombuds institutions, for example, restrictions of staff or budget. And budget, you know, most of you know what I'm talking about. The Ombudsman of Poland is facing a budget cut, about 8%, and it's absolutely unacceptable for the Ombuds family, for the Ombuds community, and it is really an attack against the Ombuds institution.
Thank you very much. You are already giving an answer to the question that I didn't ask, but there is a lot of interesting thing in your presentation. It looks like you are all accepted in your activity and in your work. And when I think about Polish Ombuds, when the office was created, maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like it wasn't really created to work. It was created to look like being. It was much more to be than to be active and effective. And it was very much due to the first ombudswoman, Professor Ewa Łętowska, who was also taken, because this was just a professor from the Polish Academy of Science, not very well known. They were expected her to be nice and smile, and instead she was extremely unpleasant, smiling though. And I think that if we can say that we know what it is being in the country that is ruled by law, it is very much thanks to her. And of course, she was very much disliked. I mean, she was disliked since. But at the same time, she was saying that one of the duty of the ombudsperson is to be disliked. It is not to be loved by those who are in power. It is to be actually challenged and discussed with. And she was accepting that role. I'm not, though, quite sure if this is something specific for all the ombudspersons in different countries, or is it a specific situation for those who are just the beginning? I mean, who are in the countries without the culture of having ombudsperson. Another thing that I want to take into consideration is those things that you were saying you were doing so well. And it looks like, again, it was so easy. And again, when we take into consideration Poland, our law for Commissioner for Civil Rights Protection is extremely rich. It's really giving an ombudsperson great power, far more than those who have in France or in Denmark or Sweden. But I was observing the work of ombudsperson in Norway, and the work looks like that if something seems to be illegal in the activity of a specific office, the ombudsperson was taking a telephone and informing the people about it. And if they had trouble to understand it, the ombudsperson was saying, well, sorry, in this case I will have to go to press. And this was enough. I mean, there was no need for special legal debates, for taking the case to the court, for writing 107 letters both ways. It was within the legal culture accepted that the ombudsperson knows what the ombudsperson is doing, and that she checked before she complained to the specific office. And this is not a personal, but it is for the goods of a society, if I can say with these big words. So taking this into consideration, and I have to also address to what Mr. Ombudsman from Spain, from Catalan said. If we would accept what you are saying, then we are without an ombudsperson. And I want to assure you that although Mr. Bodnar has his budget cut off, has all the possible constraints imposed on him, including the unfair threatening, official and unofficial, is actually working. So I think that taking into consideration Ewa Wędrowska example, our ombudsman, they should have the condition that you described. I agree with that. But even with the constraint that I tried to impose, they're not giving up. So now I'm shutting up, and thank you very much for the fact also that you are so kind and you are taking time in a proportion that you should take, so we can leave the time for the audience. What are the biggest challenges for the ombudsperson in your countries, but also in the situation we have in Europe, also in other countries? How do you see that?
Thank you very much. Reflecting on some of that, it's the nature of the job of an ombudsman to fall out with government on occasions. But most of the work of ombudsmen is, as you described in the Norwegian example. So most of the time, we will see that something we'll look at something, often we'll say nothing went wrong. But when we do see something has gone wrong, we will try to resolve that before we make a report. And only then do we resort to actually going public about a complaint. So, and that gives us a certain difficulty. So what we've tended to do, certainly in Ireland, is to publish a digest of our cases so that the learning from them is available across public bodies. You don't really want to be constantly having to deal with things through a very, very adversarial process, because it takes too long for the citizen or for the complainant. So a lot of the time I have young people complain to my office every year because they've been refused the right to assistance for their final school exams. So they want somebody to scribe, to write for them, or they want use of a laptop. They don't want me to take that to court. They don't want me to write a report because their exams will be long over by the time that happens. They want me to look at the case, see if something needs doing, and then get it done. So that's most of the work, is fixing things. Now, you asked another interesting question. Is what's being experienced in Poland something that happens when ombudsman institutions are new? I can't generalise, but I can say it certainly happened in Ireland. The first Irish ombudsman, Michael Mills, disagreed very publicly with the then government headed by Charles Haughey. And Charles Haughey proposed not an 8% cut to his budget, but a 50% cut to his budget. And civil society rose up, and the press spoke out, and the cuts were reversed. So the thing is, it is our job sometimes to speak truth to power, and sometimes power will respond. That's the nature of it. And then you have to, as Adam has demonstrated, you have to be building the alliances and the support, and above all, the office must have the credibility through its work and the support of the people who use it. And in that way, over time, as democracies mature, they become more able to accept criticism, and they see these things as opportunities to improve services rather than as an attack on the democratic order.
If you allow me, I'd like to start with a description of the Estonian ombudsman as constitutional institution. Actually, the name, which is in the constitution, is legal chancellor. There is a special chapter in the Estonian constitution about legal chancellor, whose main task is constitutional review. It means that they have the right to initiate constitutional review procedure against every legal act. And in practice, I do so. In the year 1999, the tasks of classical ombudsman, and some years later also children ombudsman and national preventive mechanism were added. And now all this gives some valuable input for the constitutional review as well. And of course, if I propose to the Parliament that they should change a law because it's, in my opinion, unconstitutional, and they know if they don't do so, I'm going to file a complaint with the Supreme Court, which serves as well as a constitutional review court. Of course they are angry. Of course I get from government members some angry SMS about state budget and etc. And once, and I hope it was joke, even some remarks on my budget. But at the moment I can't complain because in Estonia the constitutional review system functions well, in my opinion. And I feel that the model that Estonia has chosen, that we don't have any separate constitutional court, but the constitutional review is part of the judiciary, of the ordinary judiciary. It's part of the Supreme Court. Members of the constitutional review chamber come from administrative chamber, civil chamber, and criminal chamber. In my opinion, at least in Estonia, it has worked very well with the powerful and independent Chancellor of Justice. It has proved itself some way strong resistance against any political, against any attempts, political attempts to politicize the constitutional review, to cut the budget or something like that. But of course, if it would happen that as a result of elections, some political party who doesn't value adherence to the rule of law with the efficient and independent constitutional review system, and ombudsperson, legal chancellor, and the system of checks and balances, if such party would form the government and would have the majority in the parliament, I believe everything might change. There is one good practice in Estonia, or one good regulation in the Estonian constitution, which makes it quite difficult to change the constitution. I think people who wrote the Estonian constitution, the new constitution, after regaining independence in 1992, they were clever. It was criticized very much that it's so difficult to change the constitution. I feel that it was a very good decision. So, thanks.
I'm going back to the idea if they like us or not. I would say that they don't like us. The first time I took office, I was honored with the presence of, at that time, the European Commissioner of Human Rights, the former Ombudsman for Spain, Álvaro Gil Robles. And he told me, Rafael, if at the end of your mandate you didn't gain enemies, you were wrong. And he was right. Because nobody likes real, independent, controlled bodies. It's a human reaction. Sometimes it's not so human to attack those bodies, even with the suppression. But have in mind that in some countries, in Africa for example, they are under life threat. But in democratic countries could be pressures and attempts to suppress. Gunther got explain some cases. Berlusconi in Italy suppressed all the local level ombudsmen. For example, Milano City, 3.5 million inhabitants, with a very good ombudsman, Arbeta, and was suppressed from night to day, like this. Or in Spain, in 4 autonomous regions, the government suppressed the ombudsman. But I must say that the civic culture of collaboration is growing. For example, how can we measure the efficiency of an ombudsman? Do you get all the information? Because if you don't get information from the administration or the public or the private enterprise, you cannot do anything. Second question, do they answer your recommendations? But the most important question, do they follow your recommendations? Because we don't have police, we don't have jail, we don't punish anybody. It's only the reason of the argument. The Dutch ombudsman was saying, we've got 100% of following our recommendations. We are in our last report 95%, but I hope to get to 100%. Then it's a very natural reaction, but I'd say the civic culture is growing. But maybe the question is wrong. When we were organizing our last IOI workshop in Barcelona, the first mandate in the board was, let's organize a workshop on threats on the ombudsman. But we saw that the most important thing is not threats or challenges on the ombudsman. It's a small part of challenges on human rights. The challenge on the ombudsman and the threats come from the challenges and threats on human rights. The first challenge, all over Europe, I would say all over the world, security versus freedom. See France, the Republic of France, cutting constitutional freedoms to fight terrorism. Then Holland tried to go back and forth, but terrorism continues. And it's the speech of fear of the population. Second big challenge, the refugee crisis or the migration crisis, the foreigner, the fear of the foreigner, the hate speech. And the third challenge, social crisis resolves, the inequality. For me, those are the three big challenges in front of us.
The question is, what are currently the greatest challenges for the protection of human rights? In Austria, there is no doubt the refugee movement. We are a transit country as well as a destination country. Only in the year 2050, 800,000 people moved through Austria, and we received about 85,000 asylum applications in Austria, only last year. This is 1% of the whole population of Austria. We have now about 8,000 unaccompanied minors in Austria, and you can imagine what a big challenge this is to protect the human rights of these young people and all the other vulnerable groups, pregnant women, persons with disabilities, and so on. We formed a network with ombuds institutions and national human rights institutions in the so-called West Balkan route to cooperate. And what can we do? We can use all our instruments to protect and promote human rights. We cannot expect complaints from these people, of course. So we must do own initiative investigation, ex officio investigation, use our national preventive mechanism mandate, keep contact and cooperate with civil society, with media, with parliament, and so on. At the end, it's very simple for almost institutions. Our business is protection and promotion of human rights. And when we have a situation like this huge movement of refugees, this is the biggest challenge.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you are watching or reading Games of Thrones, but we are in a situation that we seems to state that winter is not coming, winter came. So actually, you know, we have also a very good constitution, very hard to change. But it occurs that you can just give a date for what it is in the constitution, and then what to do. So my next question would be, I'm just asking you to cheer us up a little bit. So just two simple things, because you actually, again, given lots of answers already on the question that I didn't ask. But if you could give us two examples of your biggest success and the biggest failure, and the way you reached the success, what were the conditions to reach the success, and how the failure is the failure, and what you think you can do about it.
Thank you. I'll go back to my time. Before I was ombudsman, now I was ombudsman in Wales. And we got a lot of complaints about health services. And in one particular instance, somebody had died as a result of poor health care. And the internal mechanisms within the health service had looked at it and found no fault. And the coroner's court was about to sit, and the evidence they were getting suggested that nothing had gone wrong. But when we looked at it, we realized that the person who had cancer of the throat had been operated on unnecessarily, because the operation that was done couldn't have helped them. And that when they inserted a tracheotomy to enable them to breathe, they had nicked the artery. And that person subsequently bled to death, even though it was obvious from the symptoms that something was wrong. They were never identified. And why the good news for this? First of all, the person's mother, who was there in horrific circumstances when they died, got a true answer to what had happened to her son. So she was able to understand that her son had lost his life as a consequence of clinical mistakes. But we also got that unit closed. There's a tendency in many countries to keep small hospitals open to serve a local community, even though they do not have enough clinical specialization to provide a safe service. So what I felt happened there was that other people would have died. I can give other similar examples. Other people would have died unnecessarily because that unit was not safe. And we were able to have it closed and the service transferred only 25 kilometers down the road. So it wasn't putting people out, but into a much larger, safer service. So you feel you've done something there of giving somebody some closure in tragic circumstances, but also made sure that other people don't suffer. I think in an Irish context, the example I was given about so many students having lost out would be the other one, so I won't labour it. Ireland has had an ombudsman for 31 years, and only one recommendation has not been implemented in that time. It was about a scheme to compensate fishermen's families when their boats were lost at sea. And we've never succeeded. And I'm still trying, because the current minister, when he was in opposition, was very critical of the government's decision. So I'm hopeful that by reminding him of what he said, he may yet change his mind and reverse it.
I must say that I have been just 1 year and a couple of months in my office, and so it might be too early to talk about some big success or some big value or some big failure. But indeed, if I talk about success, then I'd like to say that the Parliament has changed many laws after my proposal, and so solved the problems of thousands of people. And as Ombudsman, I have been able to solve some small problems, big for concrete persons, but small if we talk about the society in general. So there are several success cases. Thanks God, no big failure. Or if, then I'm quite sure that you have the same problem. How to adapt to the contemporary media, which is sometimes yellow, as they say. It means that they want to earn money. And if you write something stupid or something funny, it brings the money. And so in my work, I have had several ridiculous cases which might undermine the authority of the legal chancellor, the ombudsman. For example, as the national prevention mechanism, sent a letter to the Minister of Justice, who wanted to prohibit smoking in all prisons, in all jails, for everyone, even in areas outside the buildings, to prohibit the smoking absolutely and quickly. I wrote a letter where I just explained the European standards of the rights of prisoners. And what happened? The PR people of the minister gave to the media a title. Legal Chancellor Magazine, smoking is a basic right. And it was read in the radio. My parents called me. What? You started smoking? I said no, and I will not. But you really said something like that? You are a constitutional law professor, and you say that smoking is a basic right under the Estonian constitution. I said, of course I didn't say anything like that. Or another case where one schoolboy asked me whether the teacher has the right to take away the iPhone, as he refused to stop hearing music loudly during the class. I answered, yes. If you don't obey and you disturb others, you don't learn of yourself and you disturb others, of course. The teacher has the right to take your phone, to put it, for example, on the table. And what we read in the newspaper, legal chancellor has prohibited e-phones in the school. In the radio we heard that the legal chancellor has said that the school has the right to confiscate iPads, iPhones, etc. And as my head of communications tried to clarify, how could it happen this way? Very simple. Young journalist had only a few time to create a big story. She took our short and very clear letter to the schoolboy, which is public under Estonian law. It was in a simple language. She perfectly understood what we said. But she started to cry and said to my head of communications, but if I had written what you wrote to the schoolboy, I would be fired. Because it wouldn't be the story. There is no conflict. It's reasonable. And that's something what I must learn. I'm very sure that my office is doing better, but I have never believed that it's so difficult to use the words, to use the language, the simple language and phrases which can be understood only in one way. You have your own way.
I would like to start explaining cases where we do fail, because we also have maladministration in the Ombudsman. And each year we publish in a part of our report where we did fail, according to our charter of services and our goals. But more than that, I imagine in Poland, like everywhere, you have on television what is called soap opera stories, to make people cry. The things that get to the Ombudsman office are much deeper and dramatic than any soap opera you can imagine. Reality is much more brutal than any fiction. And it breaks your heart, and it breaks my heart when we get individual cases, very dramatic cases that we cannot solve, that we fail. If you are asking for some advertisement, they say the best advertisement is where you got results. Let me quote two. In the wealthy Catalonia, the most developed part of Spain, we, after a long queue of complaints and a long report in Parliament, we said there is bad nutrition for children. We were not saying hunger, we were saying bad nutrition. There was a big scandal. How come the Ombudsman can say that? That's demagogy, etc., etc. And doctors, colleges, everybody. Now, everybody is working on public policies to gain field, especially to lower social layers where there is bad nutrition. And the success was to take a hidden problem and to put it on the middle of the stage and provoke a big discussion and pushing for public policies to confront that. And the second one, maybe it's a little bit more spectacular, is what is called the platform Castor. Castor is a platform in front of the sea to storage gas in summer to distribute the gas in winter by a private company, profiting the drill of a Dutch company before for oil, but without any environmental control and with a law allowing the same company that if they were failing, they were going to get all the money back. They were starting putting gas there, provoking little earthquakes in the population in front of the seashore with no responsibility. There was a big social movement against that, came to the Ombudsman, we started to organize that, and at the end, the company fled, getting all the money they had invested. 1,300 million euros. That represent, at the long term, for the years we're going to pay back that, 4,000 million euros that all the consumers of gas are going to pay their bills. We took that in the environmental side to fight in our parliaments and in Brussels, and also as hidden financial state aid to a private company, absolutely prohibited by the European laws.
The biggest and most important success for the Austrian Ombudsman Board is our weekly TV show. Very serious, not a kind of soap opera, of course. We broadcast this in the public channel.
That we copy.
We have 2 cases every week, first there's a little home story, and then the complainant, the ombudsman, is on the one side, and on the other side are the officials of government or administration. And we discuss openly the case. Sometimes we have a solution during the discussion. Sometimes we have ask again. A few months later, we are again with this same case, and what happened till now. This has also a very important preventive power for the Austrian Ombudsman institution, and also very often persons with disabilities with me, and so it's also a contribution to an inclusive society, I think so. And we have a really, really high number of viewers and market place there. Not successful, yes, in the field of competencies. Year by year we try to reach competencies. We have outsourced public traffic. Subway in Vienna, for example, railway and so on. And so it's not possible formally to make a complaint about this public traffic. We have a gentleman agreement, and sometimes we can deal with complaints, but we have no right to deal with complaints in this field.
Thank you very much. That will be the last question before we go to the audience. And the question that I was asked to ask you was quite simple. What are the odds of the ombuds must face in her work? Let's make it a little bit more difficult, if you agree. You are 4 from very specific, interesting countries. You're from Ireland, a country which was not so far ago under the very Catholic Church influence, with lots of scandals, which occurs to be scandals, but which were an everyday practice for years, right? So you are from the country which was quite crap in the way of thinking about human rights. Human rights is the words that we are using on everyday practice, but we hardly think what it really means. That it means that me as a person must be treated in a specific way by those in the offices, in the courts, in the government, and they don't give a damn. They don't do that. Well, you're from Estonia, which is extremely interesting country, because very close to us, but so much different. And I think that one reason you are so different, because you are so close to Finland, and Finland is so close to Poland in its history. Really, we have the same, we share the history with Finland, in terms of dependence on Russia, in terms of lack of not being an independent country, but yet it seems that Estonia is much more oriented and looking towards Scandinavian countries, while Poland is the country which, no matter how much bad words we are saying about Russia, we have much more in common with the Russian system than with any other. Well, Catalan, who are also very much like we are in terms of patriotic feeling about independence, and yet they have this ministry for women and a very strong movement of women, and are able to fight rapes and domestic violence, while in this country you cannot even talk about it. And Austria, with such a dark past, has such a nice ombudsperson with so many positive results. So, I want to make your life now just a little bit hard. I know that the grass is always greener on the other side of the road, but put yourself in the shoes of Mr. Adam Bodnar. Be for a moment the ombuds of Poland in a situation. It was also interesting what one of you said, that when they were to cut your money for your activity, the public reacted. We've got suddenly a rise of the civil society, the civil movement. We've got the Civil Committee of Defense of Democracy. But I guess we never walked for saving the money for the Ombuds office. It didn't came to our mind, and I don't know if this is what you would suggest. But if you are a Polish Ombuds in a situation where the government and the parliament and the president is really not following the constitution and is behaving like something that reminds us of the past we wouldn't like to come to, what would you do in the frame of cutting off money and being like an island, and everyone is looking towards you for the one that can save us is you, an ombuds? What do you do, and how do you do it?
Thank you. I think Adam's doing a splendid job, so I would do what Adam's doing, but no, just some thoughts. Fundamentally, if you are to resist authoritarian government, you need a coalition of forces which together can be strong enough to give government pause for thought. In terms of defending the Ombudsman institution, most of the things Adam is doing, this is more a catalogue of what's happening. One of them is to present the good work, to absolutely make sure that examples of the good work that the institution is doing is out there, so that the public can see that it's working on their behalf and is something that needs to be defended. So simply engaging in a polarized debate doesn't get you there. You actually have to do a lot of promotional work, a lot of things that makes it say that the Ombudsman is the greatest thing since sliced bread, as we would say in English, and that this is something to cherish, something that really delivers on behalf of the people of Poland. That's the one thing. And the second thing is about the way that the engagement with civil society, which is very clearly happening in Poland, that you need to have articulate spokespeople who are prepared to speak out on behalf of the office, and if necessary, to speak out on issues like the budget and so on in a way that perhaps isn't done. It's the process of undermining by suggesting that the office is not being effective, and also small cuts to the budget. You can do that in quite a slow, surreptitious way, so that at first the office can continue to function and continues to be held in esteem, but over time it loses its authority and its capacity to act. So very important to highlight each of that step and to make sure that the bodies who are working alongside the office are articulate. The third one is about engagement with the international community. The reality is that, and we see that here, for instance, with the Austrian ambassador, people from the Irish embassy here also, the government is not immune to international criticism. It may pretend to be unaffected and so on, but in the end it's engaged internationally, it's engaged with NATO, it's engaged with the European community and so on, and a continuing stream of international criticism can be hard to deal with. So I think that's quite an important aspect of what needs doing. And then I suppose finally it's through continuing to be very active within the community of Ombudsmen, because others face similar experiences, have faced them in the past and have come through them, and there's both the consequences of practical assistance and simply the show of solidarity. Sometimes you simply want to pick the phone up to somebody and say, do you know what happened this week, and get somebody who understands what it is, the consequence of what it is you're saying. So I think those are the kind of steps I'd be taking, but then as I say, those are the steps that to a large extent Adam is taking in any event.
Oh, this is $1 million question, and I'm sure that I would receive some good price if I could give a very good solution. And thank you for your warm words. But about Estonia, that's the truth that Estonian and Finnish language are so similar, like siblings of one family. And that's why one reason why we are looking to Finland and also other Scandinavian countries, but also the German-speaking countries like Germany and Austria, and also we have been looking and look carefully to Poland, because as our president puts it, Polish people are maybe the only big nation that perfectly understand Estonians because of the past. And that's why Poland is very important for Estonian, and that's why we look so carefully what is going on here, and we really care of Polish destination, Polish destiny very much. To try to answer your concrete question, I'm sure that good colleague Dr. Adam Bodnar is making excellent work and has done and will do everything what is possible in our situation. So I'd rather say what we all should do, in my opinion. And that's to explain to the public why we need the rule of law, why we need separation of powers, checks and balances, why there is no simple unite people's will, why the powerful government without checks and balances is dangerous for everyone. And that's the question, how to touch the soul of the people, to tell the stories, you explain why we should protect the rule of law, why we should protect human rights. It's not so simple. We all have seen how sometimes politicians, but also other stakeholders, try to explain it, but some way from a position of from up to down, so that people feel that they are alone in their concerns. No one takes them earnestly. And that's the situation everywhere in Europe, that in difficult times, like now, when of times of uncertainty, people are very open to simple solutions and proposals offered by populist politicians. And unfortunately there are some people who are ready to say that yes, there are some very simple solutions to follow the people's will. And if we can some way exchange good tips, how to convince the people that rule of law and democracy is good enough to protect it in every situation, it would be very, very useful. Not for others, but for us all.
Maybe I'm going to surprise you, and I must say that I am a little bit Polish. Why do I say that? Because at the beginning of my first mandate, I got complaints saying, why in some Spanish language dictionary, under the word Polish, say, how do we call Catalans? And they say, oh, because they speak a very strange language. Even in our television, there is a program called Poland, where they make irony and comics for all politicians, the Pope, Obama, Catalan president, everybody, and at the end it makes cognac, the word cognac. We take that with an irony in favor of multiculturalism, and as what I love also Poland. But seriously, I would say, first, rely on people. I'm sorry to say that because I'm sure Adam relies on people. Rely on your collaborators, on all those movements for human rights, academy experts, as the one we are meeting those days here in Warsaw. Everybody could help and contribute in the work of the Ombudsman. Of course, as Adam is, be responsible and don't hesitate to confront maladministration and human rights attendants. Don't hesitate. And third, as was said, be in the international arena. You have the Austrian ambassador, Catherine de Broeker, the Belgian ombudsman, told me that maybe the Belgian ambassador was with us. Sorry, I don't know her, but maybe she is with us. She was with us before. We have personnel from the Spanish embassy. And then we are in the international arena. Being in the international arena, I would say I have learned a lot from my colleagues from Sweden, from UK, from I have learned a lot from those countries that are much more in advance than me in democratic culture, and that's the thing that we can learn international level, but also for networking. Don't forget, for example, that IOI in 2013 pushed in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe the approval of a report called Strengthening the Ombudsman, and was voted unanimously by all the political different representations there, even the Polish representation, and it's a good tool. Then count on the international arena, and we from IOI, we are at your full disposition.
Can be very briefly. First of all, I think no one could do it better than Adnan Bodnar. And I would try to keep and to save the motivation of the co-workers, the amazing co-workers. I think about 300 persons, and they are waiting for several reasons since years. They have more and more work, and so I think it's very, very important to keep the motivation. And second, I would build and widen networks, national and international. I think international is extremely, extremely important.
And don't forget that your problem is not only your problem. It's a constitutional court problem, it's a judge problem, it's a human rights problem, it's a little bit wider.
It's actually our problem, and well, I hope that this will be also a support for Polish ombudsman, and that you are the part of the international group with the support which we count very much for. But actually, Xavier Giraud, which is the Catalan journalist, came to me also with this statement, very proud of himself, saying, cognac. So I took a glass and took a bottle and gave him a cognac. And he said, no, cognac. So I thought he wanted to have another bottle. Now, it is cognac. There is this sip at the end, but this is not cognac yet. It's time for you now. So thank you very much for this part, which wasn't really official, and I'm really very grateful to you that you are so outspoken and frank with us, but that's time for the public now. And we'll do it somehow.
Znaczy, ja mam pytanie do...
Am I to translate, or one of you will come and help me here? Oh, okay. All right, so now you will get this stuff. Ja jeszcze powiem, że jestem bardzo kiepska w trzymaniu czasu, także róbcie to Państwo sami, dobrze? Będę pamiętać po prostu, zabieram głos.
Andrzej Kopczyński, mam pytanie do polskiej strony. Rzecznik Praw Obywatelskich w Polsce jest wybierany na 5 lat, jednak na drugą kadencję utarł się taki zwyczaj, że nie startuje. Mam pytanie, skąd się ten zwyczaj wziął i czy w opinii pani profesor jest dobry zwyczaj? Czy to jest dobry zwyczaj, że na drugą kadencję nie startuje?
Pozwolę sobie oddać głos panu rzecznikowi.
Faktycznie jest taki zwyczaj, on nie jest zapisany w przepisach, bo zgodnie z ustawą można startować na dwie kadencje. Ja powiem tak, że zgodzę się z taką tezą, że po pierwsze, dla mnie przynajmniej jest tak intensywny czas, że ja nie wyobrażam sobie, jak miałbym później jeszcze drugą kadencję sprawować ten urząd. Nie wspominając o tym, czy ktokolwiek bym nie wybrał na drugą kadencję, więc jakby zostawiam to poza dyskusją. Natomiast druga rzecz jest, wydaje mi się, znacznie ważniejsza, mianowicie taka, że jeżeli się myśli o drugiej kadencji, to trzeba iść na jakieś kompromisy, tak? To trzeba w jakiś sposób zabiegać o poparcie polityczne, a jeżeli się myśli o czymś innym niż o tym, co jest w Konstytucji, niż o tym, co jest zapisane, jeśli chodzi o gwarancję praw i wolności jednostki, jeśli się zastanawia, jakie będą konsekwencje tego czy innego stwierdzenia, takiego czy innego wystąpienia, generalnego wniosku do Trybunału, no to w ten sposób traci się niezależność. Także ja od początku mówiłem, że jestem wybrany na jedną kadencję, na drugą wołam i nikt mnie nie zmusi, żebym kandydował i się nie wybierał.
Pani profesor Wędrowska powiedziała to samo, że jeżeli ktoś ma jeszcze siłę startować na drugą kadencję, to znaczy, że nie procent wystarczająco.
Ja mam pytanie do naszych gości, Małgorzata Paczkowska. Czy zdarzyło się, że Państwo jako rzecznicy europejscy podjęli jakiekolwiek wspólne działanie? Czy próbowaliście kiedykolwiek wywrzeć jakąś presję w obronie rzecznika, któremu akurat wyjątkowo źle się dzieje? I czy jeśli nie zdarzyło się, to rozważacie w ogóle taką możliwość?
Probably the genesis of this came with the problems in Slovakia, where the Parliament refused to accept the report of the Ombudsman at the time, and the European Committee of the IOI decided to intervene with the Parliament, and we successfully wrote to the chair of the President of the Parliament, and the situation improved, albeit briefly. This time round, we decided that it wasn't enough of itself to simply write to the relevant Parliament. That would be more helpful for us, firstly, to go and gain more understanding of the situation, but secondly, to be here to show solidarity with our colleague as he faces difficult times. So I think what we're doing, we're gradually evolving, and Gunther may want to comment on it, but we're gradually evolving a methodology for supporting ombudsmen under threat so that we have a set of formal steps we can use. Sometimes it won't do any good, but I think it's often helpful if governments realise that there is international scrutiny. And the second point is that we are quite well networked with other international organisations, ranging from the Council of Europe to the World Bank. So it does give us opportunities when we produce a report to find a wider audience for that report. So those are the kind of issues we would see ourselves getting involved in, and those are the kind of mechanisms we would see ourselves using to resolve those issues.
I think any cases is different, and we try to take different forms and steps. Sometimes maybe a discreet letter is helpful. Sometimes an open letter, sometimes a public statement, a press conference, sometimes cooperation with relevant national and regional stakeholders, and sometimes, as Peter mentioned, involve international partners like United Nations, World Bank, African Union, Council of Europe, or the UN, and so on. But I think the strongest way is to support in the country, like here in Warsaw these days.
And that's the first time that a collective delegation comes to a country like Poland. I am very proud of that. because we have a longer story. I remember 2006 with Slovenia, but from individual cases, as what they were saying, each is different. But that's the first time we are doing this in a more collective and planified way, and I hope with a big success.
Thank you very much. I would like to come back a little bit to the European question and to the general context. How often does it happen that you need to intervene not towards, or perhaps not against, but towards the public authorities, but private companies, corporations, private entities? Dr. Riboy-Mas already mentioned the case of the gas cavern, but how many of your interventions are towards the private sector? And the other question, I know that it's probably not in the remit of your offices. How many complaints do you get in relation to the European law and the European Union? Thank you.
If I am able to answer this, first, it's growing. Why? Because it's growing the tendency to transfer to the market a lot of public services. I am maybe one of the oldest person in the room, and when I was a child, when I was a kid, water, electricity, telephone, all the services were owned by the state, by public companies. Now all those services you go to market to look for, among companies that they compete. But the first part of the right should be protected by the ombudsman. We are getting now, I would say, 30–35% of our complaints from this field. And I must say that the private companies answer much faster to solve the problem than the public administration. And maybe because we are just at the beginning of this area. And the European Union produced very few years ago the so-called ADR and ODR normative, alternative dispute resolution, online dispute resolution, that is provoking a big mess in the States of how do we manage that. Still, we are trying to protect the possibility of private companies making the rule of alternative dispute resolution and making business with that, it's according to the European laws, but not on the part of the basic right that should be prevented for the ombudsman role. In the UK, they have a big experience with that, and I hope they are going to continue in their first role.
Anyone of you wants to?
In Estonia, the legal chancellor or ombudsman cannot solve private disputes. And in these cases, we just advise people who write to us, to judge us, to go to the court. But there are some exceptions. For example, we have some privately owned nursery homes for older citizens. And sometimes people there are treated very badly. And if we discover it, of course, we take some steps. It's possible to ask the ministry to supervise the institution. Of course, sometimes we give the information to the media. And also in cases where someone is illegally locked, some elderly person, illegally locked in his or her chamber, in his nursery, we even have informed police. And that's one field where we try to broaden our mandate in practice. And the third area are privately owned, closed children's schools. We have some schools for children with problems or without parents, and we control these institutions as well. And they're also, although they are private, we interfere when needed under the mandate of children ombudsman.
We have now 3 people. Pani Agnieszka Grzybek pierwsza, pan i tu jeszcze ktoś się zgłaszał. Nie pamiętam kto. And about 10 minutes.
Agnieszka Grzybek from the Foundation for Equality and Emancipation STEP. I have two questions, and the first one goes to all of you. I would like to ask you whether I'm going to make a common statement regarding the current situation in Turkey, especially the fact that now there is an attack on the human rights and on the position of judges and teachers, and we are still witnessing and waiting what will happen. And the second one goes to the Ombudsman from Ireland. Ireland has very restrictive anti-abortion law as Poland. So I would like to ask you whether do you receive many complaints regarding reproductive rights, and did you make any intervention in that respect?
Thank you. The issue in Poland, in Turkey, it's very difficult for us to comment, not knowing what the situation is on the ground. But you can't but be concerned when you hear that judges, particularly, are being arrested. And I attended an ombudsman conference in Ankara a couple of years ago and heard an intervention from President Erdogan, and it did not fill me with confidence about the future of the rule of law in Turkey. They do have an ombudsman institution that functions well, but you have to be concerned about what's happening. Ireland doesn't, as Poland does, have the same institution dealing with equality issues as deals with ombudsman issues. We have had no complaints. The equalities body, which we work very closely with, has made interventions on this issue. There was a ruling against Ireland which has yet to be implemented by the Parliament, which said that the restrictions breached human rights. Obviously, we will support our colleagues in the Equality and Human Rights Agency in dealing with that. If a complaint came to my office that somebody had been denied access under the circumstances, then we could uphold that complaint, because we've always taken the view that any breach of human rights is of necessity maladministration, and therefore within the Ombudsman's competence. But most people under those circumstances would choose to go to court with the support of the Equality and Human Rights Agency, which is the way the issue is dealt with.
The regulation and protection of reproductive rights in Estonia is good, and therefore there are almost no complaints in my office. I have complaints in some adoption cases, and as probably many of you, there are many cases as the parents get divorced, and about the rights to raise the child. This is what we are struggling with, but no reproductive rights questions.
Yeah, for the first part of the question, I would say we don't have complaints on this matter, but we have a lot of complaints of parent disputes on the kids, and sometimes we can solve it because it's under public administration protection. Sometimes it's more on the court field position than it's out from our hands. We cannot recommend anything that it's already in a court procedure. And about Turkey, we did a lot to help Turkey to build an ombudsman office since years ago. They have a very recent office, and we are trying to get in touch with them, but I agree that it's a very complicated situation that we should stand a little bit in a strong position for human rights judges, for anybody that could be harmed from the point of view of human rights.
Complaints in these very sensitive fields are very difficult. Sometimes the situation changes and 1 month later everything is changed. But we try to handle and deal with these complaints, but sometimes there's no maladministration, no human rights violation, but also no solution. It's also possible.
Teraz pan i rozumiem, że jeżeli tu z tej strony... pan się zgłaszał, to pan będzie potem.
Marek Tatawa from Civil Development Forum Foundation. My question is about communication. I think what Ms. Madisa from Estonia mentioned about also this educational role of learning, teaching of human rights, rule of law and so on. But to do this you need access to good communication tools, and one tool is of course public media. What we observe now in Poland is kind of the capture of the public media by the ruling party. So my question is whether in your countries does Ombudsman have some guarantees of access to public media? Because my impression is that Dr. Bollner is not really welcome now in public TV or public radio and cannot communicate his ideas. And another question connected with communication area is the use of new technologies, and here I also look at the Estonian representative because you have this e-government and very popular use of technologies in public administration. So to what extent new technologies in the area of communication with citizens are helpful in your work and in promoting also the ideas that Ombudsman should promote? Thank you.
Yes, again we are in the lucky situation. We have our weekly TV show, and also in the press conferences it's always very interesting for the public channel and also for the newspaper. About social media and so on, we are very careful with these things because we cannot be so fast. It is necessary in this media to react in the same moment, and this is, in my opinion, quite problematic.
On communication and mass media, we can enter in those matters because we enter in all matters that are ruled in our legal frame. But there is a special body called the Public Independent Council, appointed by Parliament, and we have a convener with them. And when we get complaints on that, we pass the complaints to them. If when they solve the complaints we think it's not well solved, we can take it again. But it's a kind of agreement that first they go in. And new technologies for us means a lot of possibilities of rights harms. For example, the cap, a social cap. There are still parts of the population that they don't use new technologies. And the faster the administration is organizing through new technologies, we get complaints, people saying, I cannot enter my documents or I cannot ask for some permission because I am not used to internet or further. And the second thing is, now it's very much connected to a quite new right, at least at home, I would say, also quite new in Europe, it's a right to access to information. There should be no information, public information, that could not be reached by everybody. And the new technologies is a fantastic tool for that, and in a very fast way.
The first question, yes, I have free access to Wikipedia, and they quite often ask me to comment something or to explain decisions or recommendations or proposals to the Parliament, for example. And second, thank you for mentioning Estonian governance. Yes, we try to use new technologies as clever as we only can. At the moment, we try to develop our website to make it more attractive, to raise its usability, etc. And always, when I give out an important recommendation or a decision, or just want to explain something or clarify something, or when I give a speech at the Parliament, information about that is shared via Facebook and also via several mailing lists and the civil society organizations lists they usually have alone, and it has worked very well. I see that, for example, this case what concerned is iPhones and other smart devices, it was shared thousands of times, so it reached in Estonia almost everybody. Education is something what is important for everyone, right?
We certainly use new technologies to access individuals. At the moment we're engaged on a large project to design firstly a portal so that complaints can be made about any public service online in one place, but then subsequently to have a complaint management system underlying that to get as much of the public sector as possible managing complaints on the same platform, which will enable us to generate much more many more statistics about problems and get much more learning. And we don't have any difficulty in access to public media. The government doesn't control them in the way that we've seen here. We have extensive coverage in our reports, and the other thing we find quite powerful is that there are lots of local newspapers in Ireland which people go to, which all have websites now, which people go to for news of births, deaths and other important local items. And we find that we can get a lot of coverage by deliberately feeding local stories into small local newspapers and small local radio stations. So we get quite extensive press coverage, but there's been no government interference in that whatsoever.
But I think that if it is a state interference, I mean, it's time to stop complaining and see the possibility that we have. There is actually the platform for Polish Ombudsman, so it's on the side of Polish Ombudsman to make the information as broad as possible, and then it is our obligation to spread it further and to write about it. It's just the words and a good communication that can be used. I think that we get not far if we will only see the mountains. There's actually lots of valleys to cross. They're going to be the last now participant, and then I will hand the microphone to both of you to finish it.
Johannes Altenfeld, the panelists from Berlin. One question: did you seek, in the context of your visit today, contacts with local government to talk about issues that raised that you were going to be received and by whom? And possibly comment on the key question, why ombudsman? I think no one made the case that an effective ombudsman institution may limit the sense of frustration pervading our publics, that democratic systems of government do not address the real problems of its citizens.
Could you repeat the question loudly and slowly?
I think you actually understood it. Did you seek contacts with the Polish government? Who did you meet, and how did they react?
That's a very precise question. Now it's a very precise question. We did, and you are in heaven.
Yes, we met the plenipotentiary for civil society and for equal treatment, and we were reassured that everything in Poland is fine, that there's no cause for anxiety, that the Ombudsman's office is well funded, that the cuts only affected it the same as they affected everyone else, We also met with the committee of the Senate, the petitions, and it has quite a longer name, but the petitions committee of the Senate, where we got a diversity of views depending on the political affiliation of the members, but we met extensively with civil society as well. So I think, and we have further meetings scheduled for tomorrow. So I think that we've had a flavour of things. I think in the end we may not be entirely persuaded by what we heard from government, but I think we also tried to express our concerns about what we'd heard elsewhere and to try and make it clear to government that for instance, undermining the institution of the Ombudsman, the office of the Ombudsman, by reducing the budget, by removing some of the protections available to the office, and by reducing its access to the courts, that we felt that all of those were retrograde steps. So I think, but we will be producing a report at the end of our visit, and we hope that that too will give us an opportunity to make these points.
If there's no more, then let me once more thank you very much, Dr. Ulen Madise, Ombudsman from Estonia, Dr. Ginter Kreuter, Ombudsman from Austria, Mr. Peter Tindall, Ombudsman from Ireland, and Mr. Rafa Mimo, Ombudsman from Catalan, and Dr. Adam Bodnar, Polish Ombudsman. From what you only described, you can see that it's really very important, at the same time very hard work that you've got at the moment. Let me also hand the microphone to you and to representative. They don't want to, but one of you have to, because there is a continuation, which I'm not sure how it's really going, so...
So maybe I will say a big thank you to our guests for giving this overview of your daily work, but also your wide experience concerning your operations and activities as ombudspersons. And I'm particularly grateful for all the support you give, not to me, but to the office, to the institution of the Ombudsman, and also specifically for all detailed comments, what could be done. Because for me, it is the moment of reflection, and basically, I would say that I'm trying to be constantly in this moment of reflection, because the situation is changing so dramatically that you must be dynamic also in terms of adjusting your activities, thinking about some new possibilities, new values, as Professor Płatek has stated, and new ideas for operation in order to work properly, but also in order to make the office more efficient, and my employees who are here to be even more ambitious and even more passionate about their work. And I think that, and I still believe that we will succeed and will do our job as best as we can. And I would say that this meeting would not take place if not of Thomas Brusbaum, the Austrian ambassador, who would like also to say some words at the end.
Yeah, really this is because after the closing words of the Polish Ombudsman, Adam Bodnar, nobody should speak anymore. Thank you very much for coming and enjoy the glass of wine.
Thank you very much also to you, and szczególne podziękowania dla tłumaczy.